Story 1. The Last Mile on US 23. I'm Caleb Rigsby, and by October 14, 2019, I've been hauling freight through eastern Kentucky for nearly 12 years. Most of that time, I ran regional lanes between Lexington, Pikeville, and the river towns, pulling dry vans and reefer units, anything that paid steady and didn't require me to sleep in rest areas that smelled like bleach and old beer. I knew the Appalachian roads the way some men know their own hands, the way US 23 snakes along the ridges, the way KY 80 gets mean in winter, and how fog settles in the hollows like something poured from a bucket. That night started ordinary. Dispatch gave me a late pickup out of Ashland, palletized hardware, nothing special, bound south toward a small receiver outside Jenkins. The delivery window was early morning, so I planned to park near Pikeville, sleep a few hours, then finish the run before dawn. My truck was a 2016 Cascadia with a temperamental depth sensor, but she ran clean if you treated her gentle. I kept a handheld Garmin on the dash even though the LD tablet had navigation. Mountain Signal can turn those tablets into blank screens at the worst times. It rained hard all evening. Not a storm, just relentless Appalachian rain, the kind that makes your headlights feel like they're pushing through wet wool. I topped off diesel at a speedway near Louisa, checked the straps on the load, and rolled back onto 23. The CB was mostly dead. Every now and then I caught a distant voice, someone complaining about four-wheelers braking in the left lane, someone else singing off-key, but the static swallowed everything. A little after midnight, I passed the familiar sign, Pike County line. I'd crossed that line 100 times. Still, I felt my shoulders loosen because Pike County meant I was in my comfort zone. My GPS showed the expected route. Stay on 23, cut onto KY 80, then a chain of smaller state roads toward Jenkins. The LD clock was tight but workable. I'd make Pikeville, grab a shower if the truck stop wasn't packed, and be asleep by 2. That's when the first odd thing happened. The Garmin chimed like it had acquired new satellites, and the map refreshed. My route line vanished. Not rerouted, vanished, like the destination had been erased. The screen zoomed out on its own until the mountains were just green wrinkles and the roads looked like thin white veins. Then it snapped back in, but the white veins were wrong. US 23 was labeled in a font I didn't recognize, and the road ahead, straight ahead, wasn't 23. I checked the mile marker. The reflective number said 34. That matched where I should have been. I looked up at the green overhead sign, expecting South 23/PIKSVILLE, but the sign was older, the paint dull, the metal pitted. It read, South State Route 23 Reed City 18 Reed City. I'd never heard of it, and the distance 18 miles sat under it like a dare. I told myself it was just a swapped sign. Construction. Some county crew put up the wrong panel. I'd seen stranger mistakes. But the sign's posts were thick timbers, not modern galvanized steel. The reflectivity was wrong, too more like old glass beads than the bright new sheeting. My radio crackled and a man's voice cut through the static, close enough to sound like he was right beside me. Unit headed south, you copy? I grabbed the mic. Yeah, you talking to me? A pause, then. Southbound with the hardware, you ain't supposed to be on 23 tonight. My stomach tight. Who is this? Just a friend, take the next right. Mile marker 32, don't miss it. The transmission ended with a wet pop like the mic had been shoved into water. I eased off the throttle. The road ahead dipped into a hollow where fog lay thick across the pavement. My headlights caught the fog in layers, and beyond it the trees looked black and too tall. I glanced at my mirrors. The trailer lights glowed red in the mist, and behind me the highway was empty. No taillights, no reflections, nothing but the rain-slick asphalt disappearing into gray. The next mile marker should have been 33, then 32. But after 34, the next one said 30. I slowed more, gripping the wheel hard enough my knuckles hurt. A deer could have taken one of the missing numbers. Markers get bent, stolen, knocked down. But 2 missing in a row. And why did the air feel heavier, like the cab seals had suddenly failed and the damp cold was seeping straight into my bones? At 30, the road narrowed. The shoulder disappeared, replaced by a steep drop with no guardrail. My headlights picked out an old concrete culvert and a rusted sign half swallowed by kudzu. The sign wasn't a modern yellow warning. It was white, and it had black letters that read, "No outlet, turn back," and the arrow pointed forward. I forced a laugh, the kind you do when you don't want your mind to run away. "All right," I muttered. "Real funny." The CB crackled again, not a voice this time, but a sound like someone breathing with their mouth full. Then underneath the breathing, a faint rhythm. Thump, 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 like a heavy object being dragged across wood. I looked to the passenger seat, empty. My coffee cup sat in the holder, lid on tight. The swayed slightly even though I had the windows up. I told myself it was the road vibration. Ahead in the fog, a light blinked. Not a reflector, too steady. A red light pulsing slow. Like an old railroad crossing signal. But there were no tracks here, not on any map I knew. I rolled forward until the fog thinned enough to see what it was, an old gate across a side road on the right. The gate was made of heavy timber, the kind used at mine access roads. A red lantern hung from it, swinging in the rain. Beside the gate stood a man in a raincoat, hood up, face shadowed. He held a flashlight pointed at the ground. I checked my speed. 25. I could stop if I needed to. The side road was narrow, gravel disappearing into woods. There was no sign marking it, but the man's presence made it feel like a checkpoint, like this was where I was supposed to turn. The CB voice had said mile marker 32, but markers weren't making sense anymore. Still, this was the first right I'd seen in miles. I eased toward the gate. The man lifted his flashlight and the beam hit my grill. For a second I saw his face, pale, wet eyes too reflective, like an animal caught in headlights. He raised one hand, palm out, signaling me to stop. My foot hovered over the brake. I should have stopped. That's the safe thing, the rule, but something in his posture felt off, like he wasn't steady on his feet, like a puppet held upright by strings. I kept rolling. The man stepped forward and the lantern swung harder, spilling red light across the gravel. His mouth opened and the sound that came out wasn't words. It was a thin, strained moan, like someone trying to speak through a crushed throat. I hit the brake hard. The Cascadia's air brakes hissed, trailer tugging. I stopped with my bumper a few yards from the gate. Rain ticked against the windshield. My wipers slapped back and forth like metronomes. The man stood there, swaying. His raincoat was too long, dragging in the gravel. Under the hood, his neck looked wrong, too stretched, skin shiny. He lifted his hand and pointed down the side road. Then he pointed at my trailer. Then he pointed at his own chest. The gesture was slow, deliberate, like he was explaining a simple transaction. "Turn in. Bring it. This is for me." I swallowed and picked up the mic. "Breaker, whoever you are, identify yourself." The CB answered with a different voice, a woman's this time. Calm, close. "Caleb, don't open your door." My heart lurched. I hadn't said my name on the radio. I hadn't told dispatch my last name over open air. My cab felt suddenly too small. "Who is this?" I whispered. "Drive, don't look at him. Don't look at the lantern." My eyes flicked back to the man. The red lantern and the light seemed to leave streaks on the wet air as if the rain itself was catching fire. The man's face tilted and his mouth opened wider. I saw teeth, but not the neat rows of a human. They were uneven, like broken quartz in clay. Something bumped the side of my trailer. I froze. Another bump. Then a scraping sound, low and long, as if something was dragging fingernails along aluminum. I glanced at the passenger mirror. The trailer's side was a slick gray wall streaked with rain. Near the rear, a shadow moved close to it, hugging it, too low to be a person standing. The scraping continued, slow, patient, like something reading the trailer with its hands. The man at the gate lifted both arms now, palms up, inviting. His raincoat sleeves slid back, revealing wrists that looked jointed wrong, bones too long. He took a step toward my driver's door. I didn't think. I threw the truck into gear and stomped the accelerator. The Cascadia surged. brakes releasing with a hiss. I swung left, aiming to pass the gate on the paved road instead of turning in. The man lunged, not running but gliding toward my door, and for a split second his hood fell back. His head was shaved bald, scalp mottled with dark patches like bruises. His eyes were milky and reflective, and his cheeks had sunken so far in it looked like his face had been hollowed. He slammed his hand against my window. The glass didn't crack, but the sound wasn't a slap. It was a dull, heavy thud like meat hitting a cutting board. As I passed, the lantern's red light filled my cab and my vision blurred at the edges. The dashboard lights stretched into long smears. The road ahead looked like it was bending, not left or right, but downward like the pavement was sagging into the earth. I fought the wheel, knuckles white. The truck felt lighter, like the trailer wasn't behind me anymore. Then the tug returned, sudden and violent, as if the trailer had hit a hole. In the mirror, the shadow at the back of the trailer dropped away into the fog, and I saw something pale flash, an arm maybe, or a face pressed against metal, a mouth too wide. The CB erupted in static, then the woman's voice again, strained now. "Don't stop, no matter what you hear." And I did hear it. From behind me, through the rain and the hum of tires, came a sound like crying. Not one person, several. Thin voices, ragged, rising and falling as if carried on the wind. It reminded me of the way coyotes sound when they're close, but there was language in it, broken and desperate, like people calling for help from underwater. My throat tightened. Every decent instinct I had screamed to stop, to call 911, to do something. But the voices were wrong. They were too synchronized, eager, like bait. The fog thickened again until the world outside my windshield was nothing but gray. My headlights felt useless. The lane lines vanished. The rain stopped abruptly like a faucet turned off. Then the garment on my dash turned itself on again. The screen flashed white, then displayed a single word in blocky letters, "Return." I blinked hard. The word stayed. Under it, a thin black line pulsed like a heartbeat. I could feel sweat under my shirt despite the cold. My hands trembled on the wheel. The road beneath me began to change. The vibration through the seat shifted from smooth asphalt to rough, like old concrete. My tires hummed differently, and I smelled something sharp, coal dust, or burnt metal. Out of the fog, a building emerged on the left. It wasn't a house or a barn. It was a long, low structure of cinder block with no windows, just a row of metal doors like storage units. A sign above it read, "Reed City Transfer." The letters were hand-painted and uneven, and the sign was lit by a single floodlight that buzzed faintly, casting a sickly yellow cone onto the wet ground. In that cone of light stood 3 figures. They were close together, facing the road, not moving, too still to be waiting normally. One of them was small, child-sized. The others were adult height, but their proportions looked off, arms hanging too long. As I approached, all 3 turned their heads in unison, tracking my truck. The CB crackled, and this time it was a man again, different from the first. "You're late," he said. His voice sounded like it was coming from inside my cab, not the speaker. "We kept it cold for you." My stomach rolled. I tasted bile. I passed the building and the figures didn't move, just watched. But as my trailer went by, I heard the scraping again, this time on the underside, metal on metal. And then a dull thump like something climbing. I forced myself not to look in the mirror. I focused on the road, on the faint glow of my own headlights in the fog. My breathing came shallow, fast. I tried to rationalize. Hallucination from fatigue, stress, bad radio interference. But the physical sounds were real. The truck's suspension shifted under weight. The road dipped steeply and the fog thinned just enough to reveal a dead end ahead. A massive mound of earth and rock, like a landslide, had covered the highway. At the base of the mound sat a barricade of old wooden sawhorses. A hand-painted sign on them read, "End of line." I slowed, heart hammering. There was nowhere to go. No turnaround wide enough for a tractor-trailer. No, just the mound and the dark woods pressing in on both sides. Behind me, the crying voices rose again, closer now, like they were right outside my sleeper. Then came a knock from inside the trailer. One solid knock like a fist on a door, then two. Then a frantic barrage, hands pounding from within, traveling along the trailer wall as if whatever was inside was moving toward the front, toward me. My skin prickled. The load was supposed to be palletized hardware. Metal parts, bolts, nothing alive. The Garmin screen flickered and the word changed. Payload under it, coordinates appear. Not latitude and longitude like normal, but a string of numbers separated by slashes like a ledger entry. The CB woman's voice returned, barely audible under static. "Caleb, you have to jackknife it." "What?" I rasped, eyes fixed on the barricade. "Block the road, don't let it come forward. You have to pin it." My mind scrambled. Jackknifing a rig on purpose goes against every training instinct, every muscle memory. But the pounding inside the trailer was getting closer. I imagined something forcing its way through the bulkhead, tearing into the cab. My hands shook so hard I could barely keep the wheel steady. I did what she said. I cranked the wheel hard and hit the brakes while throttling just enough to swing the trailer. The truck lurched. Tires screamed on wet pavement. The trailer swung wide, and for a moment I thought I'd roll, but the angle held. The trailer came across the road like a gate, blocking the path between the woods. The pounding inside the trailer stopped. Silence fell so heavy it felt like pressure in my ears. Then from the trailer, a slow scraping began again, but higher now, like nails dragging along the interior roof. Something was moving upward, testing, searching for a weak point. The sound traveled forward until it was directly behind my cab. I stared at the trailer's front wall through my rear window. Rain streaked the glass. The trailer's aluminum front looked solid, harmless. A bulge appeared in it. Not a dent, something pushing from inside, stretching the metal outward like skin. The bulge formed the shape of a face pressed hard against the wall. I could make out the outline of a nose, a mouth opening and closing, smearing condensation on the inside. Then the metal tore with a shriek. A hand, pale, slick, fingers too long, punched through, gripping the edge of the tier. Another hand followed. The thing began to pull itself forward, ripping the trailer wall wider. I fumbled for the gear shift, panic making my movements clumsy. I needed to move, to unjackknife, to do anything. But the trailer was locked across the road and my pinned at an angle. If I moved wrong, I'd tear the fifth wheel or flip. The CB speaker hissed, and the woman spoke one last time, clear as if she were beside me. "Look at the lantern." I whipped my head toward the road behind, toward where I'd come from. Through the fog, I saw it. The red lantern still swinging at the gate far back, visible like a heartbeat in the gray. And standing beneath it, the raincoat man, arms outstretched, waiting. In that moment, the red light did something to my eyes. The fog thinned in a ring around it, revealing the road behind me. Not a dead Appalachian highway, but a long, straight stretch of gravel leading into a wide yard full of rusted trailers and dark buildings. Reed City Transfer. The mound ahead wasn't a landslide. It was a piled berm meant to stop vehicles from leaving. I wasn't lost. I'd been taken. The thing behind me in the trailer tore more metal, and a smell flooded the cab, sweet rot and cold iron. My vision tunneled. My chest hurt like I'd been punched. I made a choice I still don't fully understand. I shut my eyes and stared straight at that red lantern through the fog, forcing my mind to lock onto it like it was the only real thing in the world. The lantern swung, and with each swing the world stuttered, like frames skipping in a video. For a split second I saw my truck on a normal highway again, lane lines clear, rain falling. Then it snapped back to the yard, then back to the highway. The lantern's red light pulsed faster and the stuttering sped up until my stomach flipped. I heard the trailer wall behind me rip completely open. Then everything went weightless. When the world steadied, my truck was moving straight, not jackknifed, cruising at 55 on US 23 under pouring rain. The Garmin displayed my destination again like nothing had happened. The overhead sign ahead read South 23/PIKVILL, modern and bright. My hands were locked on the wheel, aching. My throat was raw from screaming, though I didn't remember screaming. The cab smelled like diesel and wet cloth, normal smells. I glanced in the mirror. The trailer was intact, but along the front wall, just behind the tractor, a long scratch ran horizontally, bare aluminum exposed where something had gouged through grime. And near the scratch, there was a handprint, pale and smeared, pressed flat against the metal from the inside. I drove all the way to Pikeville without stopping. I pulled into the truck stop shaking so hard I could barely set the brakes. I didn't sleep. I sat staring at the trailer in the rain, waiting for another knock. In the morning, when I finally delivered outside Jenkins, the receiver signed the paperwork up. The pallets were exactly as listed. Hardware boxed and strapped. Nothing missing, nothing extra. But when I opened the trailer doors, there was something I hadn't loaded. A red glass lantern, cold to the touch, sitting on the floor near the back like it had been placed carefully there. No fuel in it. No soot. Just clean glass and a metal handle pitted with age. I left it on the dock and drove away. I told dispatch I was done for the week. For months afterward, my CB would sometimes crackle late at night, even when it was powered off, and a woman's voice would whisper my name like she was reading it from a list. I sold the Cascadia the next spring. I don't haul through Pike County after midnight anymore. And whenever rain hits my windshield just right, I catch a faint red reflection in it, swinging side to side, like the last mile is still waiting for me to take the wrong right turn. Story 2. The station that wasn't on KY-15. My name's Deirdre Halcombe, and I've been a courier driver in eastern Kentucky since 2017. Medical totes, lab samples, occasional high-value parts that hospitals swear they need yesterday. I'm not a long-haul trucker, but I live on the same roads, and I've run KY-15 so many times I can tell what curve I'm on by how the guardrail leans. I keep a paper atlas under my seat because cell service dies in the hollers, and I carry a spare handheld radio, nothing fancy, just enough to monitor local chatter when the weather turns bad. On March 3, 2022, I left Hazard at 9:11 p.m. with a locked cooler in the back of my white transit van. The manifest said temperature-sensitive specimens, pickup from the regional clinic, delivery to a lab outside Whitesburg by 11:30. Routine. Cold rain, low visibility, the kind of night where the blacktop shines like it's freshly oiled. I had my dash cam running, the van's GPS on the center screen, and a cheap suction cup thermometer stuck to the inside of the cargo door so I could glance back and see the cooler space was holding steady. The first hour was normal Appalachian night driving. Oncoming headlights rounding blind curves, the smell of wet leaf litter when I cracked the window for air, occasional rockfall warning signs that always felt more like a prophecy than a caution. I passed the same landmarks I always did. The half-lit Dollar General near a fork in the road, the church with the white steeple that seems to float when fog gets thick, the pull-off where people park to watch the valley lights. At 10:02, van's GPS did that brief stutter it sometimes does when you dip between ridges. The map froze. The little arrow that represented me stopped moving even though the road under my tires kept flowing. Then it snapped back and the screen recalculated. No big deal, except the new route it gave me wasn't a route at all. It just displayed a single instruction in a neutral font. Continue straight. I tapped the screen, expecting the usual turn-by-turn list, but the list was blank. The destination pin was gone. The top bar that normally showed Whitesburg Lab 34 miles was empty, like it didn't know where I was or where I was going. The time remained 10:02. The minutes weren't moving. I checked the dashboard clock 10:03. My phone 10:03. But the GPS insisted it was 10:02 and refused to update. I told myself it was a software glitch. Restart it later. Focus on the road. I knew KY-15 well enough to finish blind if I had to. I leaned forward, peering through rain-smeared glass, watching for the familiar sign for a marathon station I sometimes used as my last fuel stop before Whitesburg. The sign appeared around the next bend, just where it should have been, but it wasn't the marathon sign. It was a tall, old-fashioned pole sign with block letters that read, "Hollow Creek service open all night." Under the words was a faded symbol that looked like a compass rose, but the points were uneven, like someone drew them from memory. The sign's lighting was wrong, too steady, too white, no flicker, no hum. It lit the rain like powdered glass. I slowed without meaning to. Hollow Creek service wasn't a place I'd ever seen, and I would have noticed it. KY-15 doesn't have surprises like that, not anymore. Everything's either a chain station with LED prices or an abandoned building with a tarp roof. This place looked maintained. The pavement in the lot was dark and clean, reflecting the sign's white light. 2 pumps sat under an awning. The building itself was squat and brick, windows glowing warm yellow. My fuel gauge was under a quarter. I'd planned to top off in Whitesburg, but the rain, the GPS acting up, and the simple comfort of a lit station on a dark road made my decision for me. I signaled, turned in, and rolled up to the nearest pump. The moment my tires hit the lot, the van's radio, usually tuned to a local station, went silent. Not static, just dead air, like the speaker had been unplugged. My phone bars vanished. The dash cam indicator light remained on, but the screen that showed its feed. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, listening. The rain sounded softer under the awning. The station lights didn't buzz. There was no distant traffic noise. Even KY-15, which usually carries a steady whisper of tires in the distance, seemed muted, like someone had closed a door on the world. A man stepped out from the building. He wore a gray work shirt and a cap pulled low. He walked with that practice station attendant pace, not hurried, not slow, as if he'd done it 1,000 times. He stopped a few feet from my driver's window and raised 2 fingers in a casual greeting. I lowered my window an inch. Cold air slid in, smelling faintly of damp coal and something chemical like old coolant. "Evenin'," he said. His voice was mild, polite, and carried a faint echo as if the words were bouncing off something behind him. "Fill you up." "Just 20 on regular," I replied. "This place new," he smiled, showing teeth that were very straight and very white. "Been here a long time." I glanced toward the road. The entrance I'd used was there, but beyond it the darkness looked thicker than it should. The rain didn't seem to fall out there. It just stopped at the boundary of the station's light. "Can I pay at the pump?" I asked. He shook his head. "Inside?" I didn't like that. Most small stations still let you pay inside, sure, but something in the way he said it, flat, certain, made it feel less like policy and more like a rule. I tried to open my door anyway, thinking I'd keep my keys in my hand, keep my eyes up. The door didn't budge. I pulled again, harder. It felt locked, but the locks were up. I hit the unlock button. The lights flashed. The door still wouldn't open, like something outside was holding it shut. The man watched without changing expression. "Door's stuck," I said, forcing a laugh. "Old van." "Windows work," he replied. The way he said it made my stomach tight. It wasn't helpful. It was instruction. I tried the passenger door, same thing. I could feel the latch move inside, but the door refused to give. Panic prickled in my scalp. I took a breath, slow, and told myself it was just pressure from the slope, just a mechanical fluke. Then I heard a sound from the back of the van. A faint, steady beeping, the cooler alarm. My cooler alarm only beeps when the temperature rises above safe range or when the lid is disturbed. I twisted in my seat and looked through the gap between the seats. The cargo area was dark, but the small digital thermometer I'd suctioned to the rear door glowed red. It read 46 degrees F. It should have been 38 degrees F. I felt heat creep up my neck. If those specimens warmed too much, the delivery would be worthless. Someone's test results could be ruined. I reached for my phone to call the lab, but the screen showed no service. The man leaned closer to my window. "You ought to bring that cooler inside," he said softly. "We got a better unit." "I can't open the doors," I replied, keeping my voice steady. Can you look? Maybe something's jammed." He nodded once, then turned and walked to the back of the van. His footsteps made no sound on the wet pavement. I watched him in my side mirror. He stood behind the van, head tilted like he was listening to something through the metal. Then he placed his palm flat against my rear door. The beeping stopped immediately. Not like someone fixed the temperature, like someone silenced an alarm. The man kept his hand there for a long second, then lifted it. In the mirror, his palm left a faint smear on the paint, dark, greasy, like soot mixed with oil. He returned to my window. "It's calm now," he said. "You can come inside, door'll open." My door handle clicked faintly like something had just released. I didn't touch it yet. "What do you mean it's calm?" His smile widened a fraction. "The cargo, it don't like the road, gets restless in the rain." Cold slid down my spine. "It's medical specimens," I said, sharper than I meant. "Nothing alive." He looked at me like I'd said something childish. "Everything's alive, just depends on how you keep it." I stared at him, trying to map his face to something I recognized, someone from town, someone from another station. But his features felt slightly wrong, like a photograph stretched too wide. His eyes were a shade too dark, and when the station light hit them, they didn't reflect. I tried my door again. This time it opened smoothly. The night air hit me full force, but it didn't feel like normal night air. It felt thin, as if the oxygen had been reduced. The rain was still falling under the awning in a fine mist, but beyond the edge of the light, the world looked motionless, like a paused video. "Leave your keys," the man said casually. I kept them in my fist. "I'm just paying for gas." "Inside," he repeated, and the echo in his voice became more noticeable, like there was a second person speaking half a beat behind him. I stepped out, keeping my body between him and the van's open door. The station lot was too clean. No trash, no oil stains, no tire marks. The pumps had no branding, no Marathon, no Shell. Just metal and glass and hoses that looked new but outdated, like a design from decades ago recreated perfectly. I walked toward the building with him a few steps behind. The door was propped open. Warm yellow light spilled out, smelling faintly of coffee and disinfectant. Inside, the station didn't look like a convenience store. There were no shelves of chips, no sodas. The room was mostly empty except for a long counter, and behind it, a wall of small square doors like a morgue drawer system. Each door had a metal tag holder, blank. A fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and the sound of that buzz made my teeth ache. A woman sat behind the counter. She wore a cardigan and her hair was pinned back neatly, like someone who worked at a clinic reception desk. She looked up as I entered, and her eyes were glassy, unfocused, like cataracts without the cloudiness. "Name?" she asked. "Deirdre," I said. "I'm paying for gas." She wrote something in a ledger without asking my last name, without asking pump number. Her pen scratched too loud in the quiet room. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "I'm not late," I replied and checked my phone again out of habit. Still no service. The time was 10:03. It had been 10:03 for what felt like 15 minutes. The man in the gray shirt moved behind me, subtle but present like a wall. My skin crawled. "How much for 20 on regular?" I asked, forcing normalcy. The woman stopped writing and finally looked at me. "We don't do money," she said. My throat went dry. "Then what do you do?" Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "We trade." Behind her, one of the small square doors in the wall clicked softly, as if a latch had been released. The click was followed by a faint sound, like fingernails tapping from inside the compartment. I backed up a step. The man behind me didn't move, but the air around him felt colder. "I'm leaving," I said. The woman's pen resumed scratching. "You already arrived." A second door clicked, then a third. The tapping sound multiplied, irregular, like several hands testing metal. The man's voice came close to my ear. "Cooler's warming," he whispered. "You want to ruin what you're carrying." I spun, but he was already a step back, hands relaxed at his sides. He looked patient. That made it worse. I forced myself to breathe. I thought about the cooler, about the beeping, about the temperature rising for no reason and then stopping when he touched the van. I thought about the cargo area going dark, the dash cam feed blacking out. how the rain seemed to end at the station's light like the world had boundaries here. "What is this place?" I asked, quieter. The woman turned a page in her ledger. "Hollow Creek Service," she replied, as if reading from a sign. "That's not on KY-15, I said. The man chuckled softly. "Not for most." One of the square doors behind the counter slid open a fraction of an inch. A breath came out of it, wet and slow, like someone exhaling through fluid. The fluorescent light flickered, and for an instant the room felt longer, the corners farther away. Stepped toward the exit. The man shifted slightly, blocking my path without looking like he was blocking it. His shoulders filled the doorway space. "You can go," he said, still polite, "after the trade." "I don't have anything to trade," I snapped. The woman's head tilted. "You brought something," she said, and her unfocused eyes angled toward the door, toward my van. "We smelled it before you turned in." A cold realization hit me, sharp and nauseating. They weren't interested in my money. They weren't even interested in me. They wanted the cooler. I swallowed hard. "It's locked," I said. The man's smile returned. "Locks don't mean much here." The tapping behind the counter grew louder. Several of the doors were now slightly ajar, thin black gaps. Something shifted in one of them, a pale shape pressing against the crack. I could see skin, grayish, wrinkled, like something kept too long in water. My mind raced through options. Run past him, fight, scream, but the road outside looked wrong. The darkness beyond the station's light felt solid, like stepping into it would be stepping into a wall. Then I noticed something on the counter, a laminated map, not a road map. A hand-drawn layout like a facility diagram. Lines and boxes labeled in neat handwriting. The largest box was labeled Receiving. Beneath it, Storage. Beneath that, Transfer. And next to Transfer, in smaller letters, KY-15 Access. I stared at it and the woman followed my gaze. Her expression didn't change, but I felt a quiet satisfaction coming off her, like she'd been waiting for me to understand. "Where does the access go?" I asked. The woman tapped the map with her pen. "Back," she said, "if you're paid up." My mouth felt numb. "What's the trade?" The man leaned his elbows casually on the counter beside me, like we were discussing the weather. "We take what's restless. You take a full tank and a clean road." "No," I whispered. "Those specimens are for a lab. People need them." The man's voice dropped. "People need lots of things." Behind the counter, a door slid open fully. Something inside shifted and a soft, eager sound came from it, like a tongue dragging across teeth. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. I grabbed the laminated map off the counter and yanked it toward me, not because I wanted it, but because I needed a distraction, something to break the moment's paralysis. The woman's hand shot out fast, fingers cold and dry, and touched my wrist. The moment her skin contacted mine, the station lights dimmed. The buzzing fluorescent sound deepened into a low hum that I felt in my ribs. The room stretched again, subtly. Air smelled strong, disinfectant, and something sweetly rotten, like old flowers left in a hot car. "You're shaking," she said softly, almost kindly. "That makes it worse." I ripped my wrist away. Her fingers left a faint gray smudge on my skin. The man sighed as if I was being difficult. "All right," he said. "We'll do it the hard way." He walked toward the door, and I realized with a spike of terror that he wasn't going to stop me from leaving the building. He was going to go to the van. I shoved past him, slamming my shoulder into his chest. His body felt oddly dense, like pushing against a sandbag. He didn't stumble. He just turned his head slowly to watch me run. Outside, the rain under the awning felt colder. The lot still held that unnatural silence. I sprinted to the van, fumbling keys, yanking the driver's door open. The interior lights didn't come on. The dash was dark. The van was dead. "No," I whispered, stabbing the ignition anyway. Nothing, not even a click. The steering wheel felt locked stiff. Behind me, the station door opened with a soft chime I hadn't noticed before, like a hospital entrance. I spun. The man in gray walked toward me, unhurried. The woman stood in the doorway, watching, hands folded. I ran to the back of the van. The cargo doors should have opened with a simple pull. I grabbed the handle and yanked. The doors didn't move. just like earlier, like something outside was holding them shut. I pressed my ear against the seam. I could hear the cooler's faint motor hum, but underneath it I heard another sound. Slow movement, like something shifting in a confined space, rubbing against plastic. I backed away, heart hammering. "That's not possible," I said aloud, because saying it felt like an anchor. The man reached the rear of the van and placed his palm on the door again. The metal seemed to relax under his hand and the latch clicked. He looked at me over his shoulder. "Open it," he said. I didn't move. He kept his hand on the door and applied gentle pressure. The cargo door swung inward smoothly, as if it had never been stuck. The interior of my van was darker than it should have been under the lot lights. The cooler sat where I'd strapped it, white plastic padlock intact. The suction cup thermometer on the door now read 38 degrees F again, steady and normal. For a fraction of a second, relief tried to rise in me. Then I saw the straps. They were still buckled, but they were wet with something thicker than rain, something that looked like clear slime. The man reached into the cargo area and touched the top of the cooler, almost tender. The padlock clicked open on its own. I took a step back and my heel hit something. I looked down. A set of keys lay on the wet pavement beside the rear tire. Not my keys, older, brass. A heavy keyring with a small tag attached. The tag read, KY-15 Access. I stared at it and my mind snapped into a plan so simple it felt like instinct. Take the keys, get back to the road, don't try to win, just escape. I lunged, grabbed the keyring and sprinted for the driver's door. The man didn't chase, he didn't have to. The lot's silence pressed on me like a weight. I jammed the brass key into the ignition. It didn't fit. Of course it didn't. But as I sat there, breathing hard, I noticed something. The van's center screen, previously dead, flickered to life. It showed a map I didn't recognize. A thin line labeled KY-15 ran through a blank green space with no towns, no landmarks. At the bottom of the screen, in stark letters, it displayed, Access open 10:02. The time on the screen was still 10:02. Outside, the man lifted the cooler and carried it like it weighed nothing. The woman opened the station door wider, and behind her, the wall of square compartments seemed deeper now, like it extended farther back than the building should allow. From inside the station came a sound I'll never forget, a collective, soft inhalation like dozens of mouths taking in scent. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel. "Start," I hissed. "Start." The dashboard lights snapped on. The engine turned over. The van came alive as if someone had flipped a switch. The center screen flashed a new instruction. Drive. I threw it in reverse, tires spinning slightly on wet pavement. As I backed out, my headlights swept across the building's windows, and for an instant the glass didn't reflect the interior. It reflected something else, rows of metal doors stretching into darkness, and pale shapes moving behind them, pressing forward like they wanted to be seen. I hit the road, turned onto KY-15, and the moment my tires crossed the station lot boundary, the rain resumed in full force, loud and real. The radio returned with a burst of static, then music. My phone bars popped back. The dash cam feed reappeared. I looked in my rearview mirror. The station was gone. Not hidden, not dark. Gone as if it had never existed. Just trees and wet shoulder and the normal black curve of KY-15. My GPS destination returned. The time jumped forward, 10:47. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel with both palms flat to steady them. I drove the rest of the way to Whitesburg in a kind of stunned tunnel, checking mirrors every few seconds, expecting headlights that didn't belong, expecting that white sign to rise again from the darkness. When I finally pulled into the labs receiving bay at 11:12, a technician met me with a clipboard and a bored expression. "Late," he said. My GPS," I started, then stopped. My throat felt tight. My words sounded foolish. He unlocked the cargo doors. The cooler sat there strapped down, padlock intact. For a wild second I thought maybe I'd imagined everything, that stress had warped my perception. Then he lifted the lid. The cooler was empty, not spilled, not broken. Empty, clean, dry, no specimens, no ice packs, nothing. Like it had never held anything at all. The technician stared at me, then at the manifest, then back at the cooler. His bored look drained away. "Where's the shipment?" "I don't know," I whispered, because I truly didn't. "They called my supervisor. They asked for chain of custody. They asked if I'd stopped anywhere. I said no, because how do you explain a station that isn't on the road? How do you explain time stuck at 10:02? How do you explain a man who can calm cargo by touching metal?" They pulled the dash cam footage. It showed my van driving KY-15 in rain, turning into a dark shoulder area that on camera looked empty. No station, no sign, nothing but trees. The video timestamp glitched at 10:02 for 13 straight minutes. During that time, the audio recorded a faint tapping sound, rhythmic and wet, coming from somewhere behind me. Then the timestamp jumped to 10:47, and the van was back on the road. My supervisor suspended me for a week pending investigation. The clinic insisted they'd loaded the specimens. The lab insisted they never received them. The paperwork became a mess that never fully resolved. Insurance wrote it off as loss in transit, like it was a misplaced box of gloves. I quit that route 2 months later. Sometimes when I drive KY-15 in heavy rain, my phone clock will flicker to 10:02 for a heartbeat and then correct itself. And on those nights, if I turn the radio volume all the way down and listen hard, I can still hear something faint beneath the engine noise, like fingernails tapping on plastic, patient and persistent, waiting for the next person who decides a bright, clean station on a dark Appalachian road feels like a safe place to stop. Story 3. The weight limit on WV-16. My name is Nolan Chaffin, and by the summer of 2021, I've been driving heavy equipment for 8 years. Lowboy trailers, excavators, tracked loaders, anything with steel teeth and a center of gravity that punishes mistake. I'm not the kind of guy who scares easy, because you can't haul 20 tons of iron through Appalachia if your nerves run hot. You learn to respect grades, break heat, and the way mountain weather turns on you without warning. You learn to read bridges like you read people, what they claim, what they can actually hold, and what they're hiding. On July 22, 2021, I left a yard outside Beckley, West Virginia at 6:38 p.m. pulling a 35-ton Komatsu excavator chained down on a detachable gooseneck. Receiver was a reclamation site near Pineville, the kind of job where they reshape old strip mines and call it progress. Dispatch routed me down I-77 for a short stretch, then onto WV-16, then local roads the last few miles. I checked everything twice: chains tight, binders locked, brake lines seated, lights working. I'd fueled at the Sheets on Harper Road and grabbed a paper cup of burnt coffee I didn't want but needed anyway. WV-16 isn't a road you take. It's a road you survive. It winds through narrow cuts where rock walls loom inches from your mirror, drops into hollers where fog pools like spilled milk, then climbs out with switchbacks that make your trailer feel alive. The posted speed limits are optimistic. The advisory signs, trucks use low gear, are not advice. They're prayers left by people who learned too late. The first hour went smooth. The air was humid, the kind that makes your shirt stick to your back, and the sky held that bruised purple look of a storm deciding whether it's worth it. I kept my engine brake on the middle setting, watched my temps, listened to the faint clank of chains whenever the road pitched. My GPS, an older Garmin that didn't need cell signal, showed me exactly where I was, and I liked that. There's comfort in a little arrow moving the way it's supposed to. Around 8:12, somewhere south of Mullins, the rain started. Not heavy, just a fine mist that turned the road's surface slick without washing the dust away. My wipers squeaked. The headlights caught the mist in glittering threads. I dropped my speed and kept my distance from the occasional oncoming pickup that appeared around curves like it had been fired from a slingshot. At 29, I passed a sign I knew well. BRAMWELL 21. Pineville 34. Familiar numbers. Familiar route. At 8:31, I passed the same sign again. I noticed because the sign had a dent shaped like a crescent moon on its lower left corner, and the dent flashed in my headlights the same way both. I hit my brakes gently, more from confusion than fear, and checked my Garmin. The map showed me moving forward on WV-16, but the mile count to Pineville hadn't changed. It still read 34 miles. The clock on my dash read 8:31. I blinked hard. Mountain roads play tricks on you, fog, fatigue, the hypnotic repetition of curves. Still, the dent. The exact dent. I told myself I must have seen a similar sign, a different one. Same distances happen all over. I kept rolling. 3 minutes later, I passed it a third time. My stomach tightened like I'd swallowed a stone. The Garmin chirped softly and recalculated, then displayed a route line that looped in a tight circle, like a snake biting its own tail. Under it, in small text, it said, "Continue 34 miles." I pulled my eyes off the screen and focused on the road. The mist had thickened into low fog, hugging the pavement. The trees pressed close, dripping. My mirrors showed the excavator's silhouette, dark and hulking, chained down like a captured animal. Then my CB radio, usually quiet on WV-16, popped with a burst of static and a voice cut through, low and strained. "Lowboy southbound, you got a load that don't like bridges." I grabbed the mic. "Who's this? What's your 20? Static crackled. "You ain't where you think you are, Nolan." My hands went cold on the wheel. I hadn't said my name. I hadn't keyed up my mic all night. My CB was on channel 19 like always, but the voice sounded too close, like it was coming from the passenger seat rather than the speaker. I forced my breathing steady. "Identify yourself." A pause, then, "Watch your weight limit." The transmission ended with a soft click, like someone hanging up a phone. Ahead, the fog thinned just enough for my headlights to catch a white sign on the right shoulder. I expected a curve warning or a grade. Instead, it was a bridge placard, reflective, simple. "Weight limit 10 tons." I stared at it, brain refusing to accept what it saw. 10 tons. My tractor alone weighed more than that. The excavator and trailer behind me were multiples of it. And yet the road dipped toward a narrow bridge spanning a creek that looked black under the fog. This couldn't be WV-16. WV-16 has weight-posted bridges, sure, but not 10 tons on a primary route. Not with no detour signage, no warning miles ahead. I eased off the throttle. The bridge came into view, an old steel truss, riveted, the kind you see on back roads and county lanes. Its metal framework rose above the deck like a cage. There were no guardrails, just low curbs. The creek below, from rain, rushing and foaming in the dark. The Garmin showed no bridge. It showed a straight line of road, clean and modern. I came to a stop before the bridge, hazards blinking. Rain misted the windshield. The fog made my headlights feel short and weak, like they couldn't push through. I sat there, listening to the idle, to the faint tick of cooling metal, to the hush of fog. In the distance, somewhere beyond the bridge, I saw a single amber light, steady. Not a street light. More like a rotating beacon, but it didn't rotate. It just glowed. Behind me, the chains on my load gave a soft, subtle clink. I'd set those chains tight. They shouldn't be moving. I looked in my driver's mirror. The excavator sat on the trailer, boom-tucked, bucket chain. But something about it looked different in the fog, like its angles were wrong. Like it was leaning forward by a fraction. Then the CB crackled again, a different voice this time, older, raspy, with a tired kind of authority. "Don't cross it with that on your back," the voice said. My mouth went dry. "Who are you?" "Somebody who crossed. Some of us still ain't done." I swallowed. "There's no detour," a soft laugh, humorless. "There's always a detour, just ain't always a road." The bridge's steel truss creaked. I froze. Bridges creak when wind hits them, when temperature changes. But there was no wind, and the creak sounded like a long exhale. The amber light beyond the bridge blinked once, then twice, as if acknowledging me. I should have turned around. Even if it meant a nightmare of backing a lowboy on a narrow shoulder, even if it meant hours lost, Angry dispatch calls, angry receiver. But the road behind me was swallowed by fog, and something in my gut told me if I tried to reverse, I'd never find the way back. The repeated sign, the frozen distance, everything felt like a loop closing. So I made the worst decision a driver can make. I committed. I eased onto the bridge at a crawl, tractor tires thumping onto the old deck. The steel truss framed my windshield like bars. My mirrors filled with the dark outline of the excavator and trailer, squeezed tight between the bridge's curbs. The first few feet felt normal. Then the bridge vibrated, not from my engine or tires, but from underneath, like something was moving through the metal. Halfway across, the fog thickened inside the truss, turning the world into gray. My headlights reflected off steel beams, making harsh, angular shadows. The creek below vanished from view. The CB hissed with static, and through it came a faint, rhythmic sound, a slow, metallic tapping. Tap, 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 like someone striking a wrench against a beam. The tapping matched my speed, keeping pace as if it was walking beside the trailer. My throat tightened. I kept my eyes forward, hands steady, but my skin crawled. My heart beat too loud. I smelled something sharp, hot brakes. No, my brake temps were fine. It smelled more like ozone and wet iron, like a storm about to break. Then my truck lurched, not from a pothole, from behind, like the trailer had been tugged backward. My seatbelt dug into my shoulder. The engine note changed as the load pulled against it. The chains clanked loud now, sudden, like a cage being shaken. I glanced in my mirror and saw the excavator's boom was no longer tucked. It had shifted just a few inches, but enough to make my blood run cold. Steel doesn't shift that easily when it's chained. The tapping sound grew faster. Tap, 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 and then through the fog I saw it. A shape inside the bridge framework, low and long, moving along the steel beams alongside my trailer. It wasn't a person. It moved like a centipede, hugging the metal, too many joints, too many limbs. Its surface caught my headlights in brief flashes, wet, dark, like coal slicked with oil. It kept pace with the trailer, and as it moved, the bridge vibrated under it. I couldn't breathe. My hands clenched the wheel until my wrists ached. The shape reached the trailer's rear. The whole rig shuddered as if something heavy had landed on it. My air pressure gauge flicked. The truck's suspension groaned. The steering went lighter, then heavy, as weight shifted unpredictably. Whatever was on the trailer wasn't just standing, it was climbing onto the load. The excavator's cab window reflected my headlights, and for a second I saw something in that reflection that wasn't the excavator's interior. A pale oval shape like a face pressed close to glass. No features, just a smooth surface with a wet sheen. My stomach turned. I tasted bile. The amber light ahead grew larger as I neared the far end of the bridge. It wasn't a light on a pole. It was on top of a piece of machinery, an old dozer maybe, sitting just beyond the bridge entrance, idling silently with no visible exhaust. Its beacon glowed steady, painting the fog amber, and beside it stood three figures in rain gear, still as fence posts. I rolled off the bridge onto gravel, tires crunching. The moment my rear trailer tires left the bridge deck, the tapping stopped. The bridge exhaled a final creak behind me, and the fog shifted as if relieved. I didn't stop. I kept rolling toward the gravel turnout, trying to put distance between my rig and that bridge. The dozer and the figures stayed in my peripheral vision. They didn't wave. They didn't signal. They just watched. My Garmin screen went black. Lit again with a new display, no map, no road lines, just a simple number in the center, 34 beneath it, smaller, weight remaining. My throat went tight, weight remaining, like a scale, like I was paying a toll in tons. Behind me, the excavator's chains clinked again, softer now, almost content. I forced myself to look in the mirror. Something was sitting on the excavator's tracks. It was hunched and heavy, blending with the machine's dark silhouette, but I could see its outline against the fog. Too long, too many angles. It looked like a mass of limbs folded in on itself. Its head, if it had one, was turned toward the cab of the excavator, as if listening for something inside. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slam the brakes, jump out, run. But the figures near the dozer hadn't moved, and the gravel road ahead disappeared into fog like a tunnel. I felt with cold certainty that stopping would be an invitation. So I drove. The gravel turnout wasn't a turnout at all. It became a road, narrow but maintained, leading away from what should have been WV-16. Trees closed in, their branches forming an arch overhead. The fog here was thicker, and it didn't behave like fog. It clung in sheets that seemed to part only when my headlights hit them. My phone had no service. The CB was pure static. The engine sound felt muffled, as if the air itself was absorbing noise. I drove 10 minutes, 15. The dash clock still said 8:31. The number on the Garmin changed. 34, 33, 32 with each mile. The weight remaining count dropped by 1. My mind tried to make sense of it in pieces. Maybe it was a prank GPS screen. Maybe I'd somehow switched to a weight station app. But deep down I knew it wasn't my device measuring anything. Something else was counting down. As the number dropped, the load behind me felt lighter. The steering became easier. The engine didn't strain as much on small grades. It was subtle but noticeable to someone who hauls heavy for a living. And the thing on the excavator, whatever it was, shifted with less violence. It seemed to settle, as if feeding. At weight remaining 28, I felt the first real fear of what that meant. If it was taking weight, where was it going? The excavator wasn't dissolving. The trailer wasn't disappearing. But the feel of the load was changing. At weight remaining 21, I heard a noise from behind the cab, an unmistakable metallic groan like steel under strain. I glanced in the mirror and saw the excavator's boom had risen another few inches, not from vibration, but as if something had pushed it from underneath. The thing's limb wrapped around the boom now, hugging it like a spider hugs prey. Its surface glistened. It wasn't fur. It wasn't skin. It looked like wet slag. At weight remaining 14, the road ahead opened into a clearing that shouldn't exist. The trees pulled back to reveal a wide, flat yard of compacted dirt, ringed by dark shapes of abandoned machinery. Bulldozers, loaders, rusted trucks, all sitting silent like they'd been left mid-shift. There were no buildings visible, no lights except the glow of my own headlights and a faint, pale radiance coming from the far end of the yard. That radiance wasn't a lamp. It looked like moonlight, but concentrated, pooling on the ground in a broad circle. I rolled into the clearing, heart pounding. The Garmin read weight remaining 10, and then the number stopped changing. The engine began to sputter. Not like fuel starvation, I had half a tank. Not like electrical failure, the dash stayed lit. It was more like the truck was forgetting how to run, as if the rules that kept pistons firing were being rewritten in the fog. I fought the wheel and aimed toward the pale circle of light, because it felt like the only defined thing in a place that was unraveling. As I entered the circle, everything became sharply clear for one horrible second. The yard wasn't abandoned, it was full, not with people standing, with people arranged. Along the edges of the circle, half buried in dirt and coal dust, were human-shaped forms. Some wore hard hats fused into skulls. Some wore reflective vests turned brown with age. Their bodies were positioned like they'd crawled to the edge and stopped. Their mouths were open, faces stretched in silent strain. Their eyes were gone, replaced by empty wet cavities that reflected my headlights. They weren't dead in the clean way. They looked preserved by cold and mineral, like they'd been packed in damp earth and forgotten. And standing among them, perfectly still, were the three figures in rain gear I'd seen near the dozer, only now I could see their faces. There were no faces, just smooth, wet ovals under hoods like the pale reflection I'd seen in the excavator cab window. My breath hitched. My vision swam. Behind me, the thing on my load lifted itself higher. Its limbs unfolded with a series of wet pops. The excavator's boom rose more, not because hydraulics engaged, but because the thing's weight and leverage forced it. The metal groaned. The Garmin screen flashed. Weight remaining 10 transfer required. The figures stepped forward in perfect unison. My truck's engine died. The silence that followed was absolute. No rain, no insects, no distant highway, just my own heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled for the ignition. The starter clicked once, then nothing. My hands shook so badly I dropped the keychain and heard it clatter against plastic like a gunshot in the stillness. Outside, the figures in rain gear approached the trailer, their movements smooth and wrong, like video played at a slightly incorrect frame rate. They didn't look at me. They looked at the excavator, at the thing perched on it, as if this was routine. The thing made a sound, low, vibrating like a purr felt more than heard. The steel truss bridge in my memory creaked again in my mind, and I realized the sound wasn't pleasure, it was hunger. One of the figures reached up and placed a hand on the excavator's boom. Its gloved fingers sank into the metal slightly as if the steel were soft. The excavator shifted, not slid, shifted like reality around it bent, like the machine was being pulled sideways through something unseen. The chains that held it down didn't snap. They simply went slack, as if the object they restrained had moved without moving. My mind screamed. I yanked the door handle and stumbled out of the cab, boots hitting dirt. The air in the circle of pale light was cold enough to burn my lungs. I ran toward the tractor's front, thinking I could unhook, thinking I could separate from the trailer and escape. The moment my foot crossed out of the pale circle, the fog slammed into me like a wall. I couldn't see my own hands. The air tasted of cold dust and rust. I heard whispers, not voices speaking words, but the soft friction of many mouths trying to form language. Something brushed my shoulder and my skin erupted in goose flesh. I spun, swinging my arms, but there was nothing visible. Then close to my ear, I heard a man's voice, exhausted and distant, like it was traveling through a long pipe. "Don't give it your weight," the voice whispered. "It don't stop at iron." My breath came in ragged gasps. "Who are you?" I choked. A soft, wet cough answered, followed by a faint clink like a hard hat tapping stone. "Somebody who got light," the voice said. "Too light." The fog shifted, and for a heartbeat I saw a face inches from mine, gray, eyes hollow, mouth cracked with cold dust. Then it vanished like a reflection wiped away. I stumbled backward into the pale circle again because the fog outside it felt alive. Inside the circle I could see the trailer now. The excavator was halfway gone, not dragged away, not driven. Gone as if swallowed by the air beside it. The thing that had perched on it was stretched, elongated, its limbs anchored on my trailer deck while the rest of it leaned into an invisible opening. Its surface rippled like liquid rock. The figures in rain gear stood around it, metal, steadying the transfer like dock workers guiding a pallet jack. The Garmin screen inside my cab flashed again through the windshield. Weight remaining. 10 NON compliant item detected. My blood ran cold. Non-compliant item, not the excavator, me. The closest figure turned its hood toward where I stood. No face, but I felt its attention like a pressure on my skin. The fog behind me rustled. Something heavy moved in it, circling the edge of the pale light. I backed toward the cab, eyes darting. The tractor was dead, but the door was open. The sleeper behind the seats looked like a cave. The figure took one step toward me, and I felt my legs weaken, not from fear alone, but from a sudden heaviness, as if gravity had increased. My boots sank slightly into the dirt. My arms felt weighted. My heart thudded slower, laboring. The yard wanted my weight. I grabbed the cab's grab handle and hauled myself up, fighting the heaviness. My fingers felt numb. I reached inside and yanked open the glove box where I kept my old paper map and my registration. My hand closed around the metal tire thumper I kept under the seat, solid oak with a steel core. It wasn't a weapon, not really. It was comfort. As I pulled myself fully into the cab, the Garmin emitted a sharp beep, the first truly normal sound in what felt like hours. The screen flickered, and for a split second it showed my real map again. WV-16, the next town, the proper route. Then it changed back, but the weight remaining number jumped. 1098. The heaviness on my body increased with each tick. I realized with sudden clarity what was happening. It wasn't counting miles anymore. It was counting me. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my CB mic and squeezed the transmit button, not caring what channel, not caring if anyone heard. "If anybody's out there, I'm on 16 near," my voice cracked. "Near Mullins. I need." Static swallowed my words. Then through it, the older raspy voice returned, faint but present. "Nahlen," it said, "you got to dump the weight." "I can't," I gasped. My chest felt compressed. "It's taking it." "Not your load," the voice said. "Your name, dump your name." My vision blurred. Dump my name. My mind groped at it, desperate. The heaviness was unbearable now, like my bones were turning to lead. The Garmin read weight remaining 6. Outside, the hooded figures moved closer. The fog's unseen thing circled faster, making soft scraping noises on the dirt like nails. The CB voice hissed, urgent. "Say it wrong. Say it different. Don't answer to it." The Garmin read 5. My mouth. I could barely form words, but I understood the shape of the warning. The yard had identified me by name, had pinned me like a tag on cargo. So I did something that felt insane. I forced air into my lungs and spoke into the cab, into the dead radio, into the pale light itself. "My name ain't Nahlen," I rasped. "It's," my mind flashed to my mother's voice calling me by my childhood nickname, the one I hated, the one I hadn't heard in years. A name that didn't belong to the man hauling steel tonight. "It's Lanny," I said. "Lanny Chaffin." The cab shuddered as if struck by wind. Outside, the nearest figure stopped mid-step. The Garmin screen blinked. Weight remaining 5. Identity mismatched. The heaviness on my chest eased slightly, enough for me to inhale without pain. My hands tingled. My heart sped up again, frantic but alive. I repeated it louder like a mantra. "Lanny. Lanny Chaffin, that's me." The fog outside the pale circle recoiled as if the sound repelled it. The unseen heavy thing skittered backward, scraping frantic lines in dirt. The hooded figures turned their blank hoods toward each other, subtle like a conference without words. Then, with smooth, synchronized motion, they backed away from my cab. Behind them, the thing on the trailer made a vibrating growl, deeper now, irritated. Its limbs flexed. The excavator, half gone, shuddered and then slid back into place with a wet reality warping lurch, as if whatever opening had been there snapped shut. The chains on my trailer went taut again with a violent jolt. The whole rig rocked. My truck's engine roared back to life on its own. The sudden sound made me flinch. Dashboard lights stabilized. Air pressure climbed. The world outside the windshield blurred as fog rushed past like water. The pale circle of light collapsed inward, shrinking to a pinpoint. I stomped the accelerator. The cab lurched forward, tires biting dirt, then pavement, and suddenly I was back on WV-16, rain pouring, wipers squealing. My headlights caught the familiar curve signs. My Garmin showed the proper route. The dash clock read 9:07. I almost cried from the sheer normalcy of it, but my trailer felt different. Lighter, too light. I pulled into a wide gravel pull-off near a rock cut, hazards on, shaking. Rain hammered the roof. My breath came in ragged bursts. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, boots splashing in puddles, and walked back to the trailer. The excavator was there, but it wasn't right. Its paint looked dull, as if aged years. Rust streaked down from bolt heads. The hydraulic lines looked cracked. The Komatsu logo was faded and peeling like a sticker left in sun. The chains were still tight, but the steel links looked thinner, worn, like they'd been ground down. And on the trailer deck, beneath where the excavator's tracks rested, were shallow impressions in the metal, handprints. Dozens of them, pressed into steel as if the deck had been soft clay. The prints varied in size. Some were small, child-sized. Some were huge, fingers too long. All of them were smeared with dark residue that looked like coal dust mixed with grease. I climbed back into the cab and sat in the rain, staring at my hands on the wheel. I tried to remember exactly what I'd said, what name I'd used, because it felt slippery in my mind, like trying to hold water. When I finally reached the reclamation site near Pineville at 11:18 p.m., the foreman met me with a flashlight and a scowl. "You're late," he said. "Traffic," I lied because I couldn't give him the truth. He walked around the excavator, shining his light. His expression shifted to confusion. "This ain't the unit we ordered," he said slowly. "What?" My throat tight. He pointed at the serial plate on the excavator's body. "This serial's old," he said. "This machine's been decommissioned, ain't even supposed to be in service." I stared at the plate. The numbers looked familiar, but not in a good way, like a date you remember because it was on a headstone. I called my yard the next morning. They swore up and down the excavator I'd hauled was a 2018 model with clean paint and new hoses. They asked if I'd swapped loads. They asked if I'd hit something. They asked if I was drinking. I drove back to Beckley with my stomach in knots, and when I arrived, the yard manager stood waiting with arms crossed. Behind him, parked in the lot, was another Komatsu excavator, clean, bright yellow, brand new. Same model, same attachments, same serial number. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Where'd you get yours?" he demanded. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My tongue felt thick, and my chest tightened again at the thought of that pale circle of light, that yard full of arranged bodies, those blank hoods. They quarantined my truck and trailer for inspection, and by the end of the week, the company decided the easiest thing was to blame paperwork. They said the serial plate on my excavator must have been wrong. They said the yard's inventory system had glitched. They said the foreman must have misread it. Everyone chose the explanation that required the least looking. But I started noticing things after that night. Small changes. My driver's license felt wrong in my wallet, like the name didn't sit on it the way it used to. People I'd known for years would pause before greeting me, eyes narrowing slightly, like they were searching for something they couldn't quite grab. Once, at a diner off I-77, the waitress brought my check, and the name on the receipt was Nalan. It was Lanny. I hadn't told her any name. I'd paid with a card that said Nalan Chaffin. She swore she'd written it correctly. Her handwriting on the receipt looked like mine. I stopped running WV-16 at night. I started introducing myself slowly, deliberately, making sure I heard my own name in my mouth. And sometimes, when fog is thick and rain makes the road shine like oil, my Garmin will flicker for a moment and display a single number with no map. 10, and I'll feel a sudden heaviness in my chest, like something in the hills remembers the weight of my real name and is still waiting for me to cross the wrong bridge again. Story 4. The Whitechapel pull-off on US 52. My name is Marisol Gentry, and I've been running hotshot freight through West Virginia and Southwest Virginia since 2018. 1-ton dually, gooseneck trailer, toolbox full of binders and chains, and a mind that never fully shuts off. Hotshot work is half driving and half problem solving. You're the dispatcher, the mechanic, the safety department, and the person who has to explain to a receiver why you're arriving at 3:00 a.m. with brake dust on your rims and road grime on your face. On November 9th, 2023, I left Bluefield at 7:46 p.m. hauling a crated industrial generator head, 900 pounds on the manifest, bound for a water treatment job near Williamson. The crate was strapped to a steel skid, then chained to the trailer through D-rings. I checked the WLL tags on the chains, checked the binders for thread bite, and marked every binder handle with orange tape the way my trainer taught me. My Ram's exhaust brake worked fine, tires were good, and I had a cheap infrared thermometer in my console, because in the mountains you learn to check hubs and rotors like you check your pulse. US 52 at night is a long dark ribbon stitched through hollers and ridgelines, with tight turns that come at you like accusations. The coal trucks know it, the locals know it, the GPS pretends it does. I used a dedicated Garmin on the dash and kept my phone nav as backup, but I trusted my eyes more than either. The weather was cold and clear, but the kind of clear that makes darkness deeper, where the woods swallow headlight spill and give nothing back. For the first hour, everything was ordinary. I stopped at a fuel station near the edge of Bluefield, topped off diesel in the aux tank in the bed, and grabbed a microwaved sandwich I didn't finish. I rolled back onto 52, settled into the lane, and listened to the CB on scan. Channel 19 was mostly static with occasional coal hauler chatter, short, clipped phrases about load weights and gravel on a curve. I kept my speed conservative, 20 under in places, because the crate behind me made my whole rig feel like a pendulum. At 9:18 p.m. my Garmin chimed, not the usual route alert, a single tone like a warning. Then the map zoomed out on its own. The route line didn't disappear like a glitch. It didn't reroute, it folded. The bright purple line doubled back over itself, then over itself again, like someone drawing a knot. My destination marker slid off the road entirely and hovered in a blank green area. I tapped the screen. It wouldn't respond. The only thing it displayed clearly was the road name, US 52. My phone nav still worked, and it still showed a straight path to Williamson. I told myself the Garmin was just being Garmin, losing lock in a low coverage area. I turned down the radio and focused on the asphalt ahead, on the reflectors in the center line blinking like eyes. 10 minutes later, I saw a sign I didn't recognize. It wasn't an official dot sign. It was white board, hand-painted letters nailed to 2 posts. My headlights caught it late because it sat at the edge of a gravel pull-off, half hidden by brush. Whitechapel pull-off, no arrow. Just those words, and under them a crude drawing of a small church with a steeple. I slowed without meaning to. There are plenty of roadside churches in Appalachia, little white clapboard buildings tucked into hollers like secrets, but this sign felt personal, like it had been made for someone specific. My CB popped with static and a voice came through, soft and female, as if the speaker were sitting in the passenger seat with her mouth close to the mic. Marisol, you got your binders marked. My hands went cold on the steering wheel. My name wasn't on the side of my truck. I wasn't running under my company's dot number anymore. I'd been independent for 2 years. I grabbed the mic. Who is this? The voice didn't answer my question. Pull off, it said. Before the chapel sees you moving. I stared ahead. The gravel pull-off appeared again just around the next bend, exactly the same hand-painted sign, same brush, same drawing of the church. I slowed so hard my trailer tugged, chains clinking softly. The road behind me in my mirrors was empty. No headlights. No taillights. Nothing. Just black tree, faint silver thread of asphalt. I passed the sign again. My heart hammered. I checked my phone. Time, 9:31. I checked the dash clock, 9:31. I checked the Garmin. It had frozen on 9:18. My phone map still insisted I was moving. But the world outside my windshield started to feel like it was repeating. The same curve. The same rock face. The same broken reflector post leaning at the same angle. I told myself to turn around. But a gooseneck trailer with nearly 5,000 pounds chained down is not something you spin around on a mountain road without a wide turnout. And the pull-off was the only wide spot I'd seen. The sign appeared again, Whitechapel pull-off, and this time I signaled and eased in, gravel crunching under my tires. The pull-off was larger than it looked from the road, flattened like a small lot. My headlights washed over a short dirt lane leading away into trees. At the end of that lane, maybe a quarter-mile back, stood a small white building, a chapel. It looked too bright even in darkness. Not lit from within, just white enough to catch my headlights and reflect them back cleanly. The windows were black. The steeple was narrow, sharp. I rolled a few yards farther in and set my brake. My trailer settled with a heavy sigh. The chains tight. The crate behind me sat solid and silent. In the silence that followed, I heard something I didn't expect. Singing. Not loud, not close. A distant hymn, thin and wavering like it was being carried from far away through cold air. No instruments, just voices, several of them blending in a way that made my skin prickle. My first thought was simple, church service. Night service, revival, something like that. Appalachia has those. People gathering in a small chapel to sing and pray late into the night isn't strange on its own. But the singing wasn't coming from the chapel. It was coming from inside my trailer. I froze, breath shallow, eyes locked on the gooseneck in my side mirror. The crate sat where it should. No movement, no shifting. The hymn continued, muffled as if trapped behind wood. The words weren't clear, but the cadence was unmistakable, like a congregation repeating a familiar song. My mouth went dry. I reached into the console for my flashlight, fingers trembling. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the CB was bleeding into the trailer's metal. Maybe the wind was funneling sound. Maybe my mind was overfilling the silence with something to hold on to. The CB crackled again, louder now, same female voice. "You got to check it," she said. "If you keep hauling it, it'll finish the verse." "What are you talking about?" I whispered, not even keen. Speaking into the cab, the voice answered anyway. "That crate didn't start empty." A cold wave rolled through me. The manifest was generator head, industrial, no hazmat. I'd picked it up from a fenced yard outside Bluefield. 2 men with forklifts had loaded it. It had been sealed with banding and screws, and I'd signed the BOL. Nothing about it had felt wrong. But I remembered one thing. When the forklift set it down, the crate had made a sound that wasn't wood on steel. It had made a soft, wet thump like something settling. I hadn't thought about it at the time. Outside, the chapel stood white and still. The dirt lane leading to it looked darker than the surrounding woods, as if the shadows there were deeper, thicker. The hymn inside my trailer shifted to a new line, and the voices rose slightly, eager, as if reaching a part they liked. I forced myself to move. I grabbed my flashlight, unlatched my door, and stepped out into cold air that smelled of wet leaves and coal dust. The sky above the pull-off was clear, but the stars looked dimmer here, like the darkness had eaten their edges. I walked along the side of my trailer, boots crunching gravel. My breath came out in white puffs. The singing grew louder the closer I got to the crate. When I reached the rear of the trailer, I shined the light onto the crate. The wood looked normal at first, rough plywood panels, bracing, stenciled shipping marks. But then I saw the writing, not the stenciled shipping label. Something else, scratched into the wood with a nail or knife, shallow but repeated so many times it looked like a pattern. Home, 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 over and over, like a child carving the same word in a desk. The hymn stopped abruptly. Silence snapped into place so fast it made my ears ring. Then something inside the crate knocked once. A single knock, deliberate. I stumbled back, heart slamming. The chains on the crate trembled, a tiny vibration traveling through metal like a warning. I shined my flashlight along the edges of the crate, looking for gaps, for broken boards. Another knock came, closer to the side facing me. Then a soft scraping sound, like fingernails dragging along the inside of plywood. My throat tightened and I forced air through my teeth. "Who's in there?" My voice sounded stupid in the cold night. The scraping stopped. From inside the crate came a whisper, barely audible. Not words, not exactly. More like breath-shaping sound, as if someone was trying to remember how to speak. Behind me, down the dirt lane, the chapel's front door creaked open. I spun my flashlight beam toward it. The chapel door stood open, black interior visible like a mouth. No light spilled out. No figures appeared. Just that open doorway, in a way that made my stomach turn. And then from the chapel, a single note of singing began, one voice, clear and strong. It matched the pitch of the voices that had been inside my trailer. My skin crawled. I backed toward the cab, never taking my eyes off the chapel. The note held, unwavering, and the air around it felt charged, like static before lightning. The CB in my cab crackled again, and the female voice came through, urgent now. "Marisol, if it sees your taillights, it'll follow you." I climbed into the cab and slammed the door, locking it out of reflex. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I stared at the dirt lane, at the open chapel door. "Who are you?" I finally asked into the mic, voice raw. "How do you know me?" A pause, and then the voice softened. "I used to haul," she said. I stopped before I finished the song. A cold dread pooled in my gut. "What's in the crate?" The voice didn't answer directly. "It wants to be delivered," she said. "That's how it travels, through paperwork, through signatures, through people who don't look too close. The generator head, the sealed manifest, the forklift men, the fenced yard. All of it suddenly felt like a costume draped over something older and hungrier. Outside, the chapel's open door seemed wider now, as if the building itself had shifted slightly closer without moving. My headlights still caught its white paint, but the edges looked blurred, like it wasn't fully anchored in the world. Inside the trailer, the crate began to vibrate, subtle at first, then stronger. The chains tightened and pinged, metal singing high. My rearview mirror shook with the vibration. Then through the vibration, I heard it again, the hymn. Only now it wasn't muffled. It was inside my cab. The voices rose around me, not from the speakers, not from the radio, but from the air itself, filling the space behind my ears. The sound had weight, pressing on my chest, making my breath shallow. I tasted something metallic on my tongue, like old pennies. The dash lights flickered. The Garmin screen blinked alive and displayed a single phrase in block letters. Delivery confirmed. My blood ran cold. Confirmed. I hadn't delivered anything. I was sitting in a gravel pull-off with a chapel that shouldn't be here and a crate that was singing in my head. The crate on the trailer jerked, a violent shift, and one of the chains snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The broken end whipped and clanged against the trailer deck, sparking briefly. The hymn surged. I gripped the wheel and forced my mind to work like a machine. Escape. Rationalize. Survive. If taillights let it follow, then I couldn't leave normally. I couldn't pull back on 2 and drive away with red lights blazing like a beacon. But I couldn't stay here either. The chapel door was open and whatever was happening was accelerating. I reached down and killed my running lights. The cab went darker. The trailer lights went out. Only my headlights remained, flooding the pull-off and the chapel with white glare. The hymn faltered as if confused. Outside, the chapel door creaked wider. I thought of the binders marked with orange tape. I thought of the straps. The chains, the load. The voice on the CB whispered, "Make it lose sight of you." "How?" I rasped. "Don't give it a straight road," she said. "Don't give it a clean line." I understood in a flash. It moved like freight moves, on predictable routes, on clear instructions, on straight deliveries. If I broke the pattern, if I made it messy, maybe it couldn't keep hold. I threw the truck into gear, turned hard, and began circling the pull-off in a tight loop, gravel spraying. The trailer swung behind me, crate rocking slightly. The broken chain end clanged. The hymn shifted into something harsher, voices overlapping, out of sync, like a congregation losing the beat. I kept circling, tighter and tighter, until the trailer jackknifed slightly and the crate lurched. Another chain snapped. Then another. The crate slid a few inches on the trailer deck and the wood groaned. The chapel's white walls flickered in my headlights like a strobe, appearing closer, then farther, as if the building couldn't decide where it belonged. The hymn in my cab became screaming. Not loud screaming, still sung, still melodic, but filled with strain and panic, like voices forced to hold a note past the point of pain. I felt it in my teeth. My vision blurred at the edges. I jerked the wheel hard and aimed the trailer toward the dirt lane leading to the chapel, not to go to it, but to block it. I jackknifed the gooseneck across the mouth of that lane like a barricade, stopping so fast my seatbelt locked. The crate slammed forward against the remaining chains. Wood cracked. And from inside the crate came a sound that wasn't human and wasn't machine, something like a throat clearing in a body that hadn't used its throat in a long time. The chapel door slammed shut. The sudden silence was so complete it felt like vacuum. My breath came in ragged bursts. My hands shook uncontrollably. The truck idled, headlights fixed on the chapel. Slowly, the chapel door opened again, just a crack. A thin, pale light seeped out this time, not warm yellow like candles, but cold white like moonlight concentrated into a blade. The light spilled onto the dirt lane in a straight line, pointing toward my trailer as if marking it. The Garmin on my dash beeped and displayed a new instruction. To receiver, my phone nav had no signal now. It displayed a blank map, then a spinning wheel, then nothing. The CB female voice whispered, "It's trying to route you." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "Unhook," she said. "Leave it." The word hit me like ice water. Leave it. abandon the load, break every contract, every professional instinct. But the crate behind me shifted again, and the wood creaked like a living thing stretching. I made myself move. I got out into the cold, flashlight shaking in my hand. The chapel's pale light stayed fixed on the trailer like a spotlight. The air smelled sharper now, like bleach and wet stone. I ran to the gooseneck, hands fumbling at the latch. My fingers were numb. The metal was cold enough to sting. I yanked the release, dropped the jack, and unhooked the coupler with frantic jerks, ignoring the proper sequence because proper sequence felt like it belonged to a world that wasn't here. Behind me, the crate began to knock rhythmically from the inside, matching the cadence of a hymn beat. 1-2, 1-2. The chapel's pale light bright. I climbed back into my truck and slammed the door, heart pounding. I kept my headlights aimed at the chapel, but I turned the truck sharply away from it, so my rear would face the lane if I pulled out. I remembered what the woman said about tail lights, and my throat tightened. I did something I'd never done on purpose in my life. I drove forward out of the pull off the wrong way. Instead of backing out, instead of turning around, I pulled forward in a tight arc and re-entered US 52 headed the direction I'd come from, keeping my taillights angled away from the lane as long as I could. My headlights lit the road. My running lights stayed off. The trailer was gone behind me, left in that pull-off like a sacrifice. As soon as my tires hit the pavement, the world snapped back into normal noise. The wind rushed. The distant hum of another vehicle existed again. The rain that hadn't been falling began to fall in fine, cold drops. In my mirror, I saw the pull-off for a split second. The chapel wasn't there, just brush and gravel and darkness. But my trailer was still there, its reflective tape catching my headlights in bright strips. And in the center of that trailer where the crate had been, there was now a white shape. A small chapel sitting on the deck like cargo. Perfectly formed, white paint gleaming, steeple sharp. Too big to be real, too small to be a building. Like a model, its door was open. A pale white light spilled out and aimed down the highway behind me, searching. I drove until my hands cramped and my eyes burned. I didn't stop until I hit a well-lit near Bluefield where other people stood outside smoking, laughing, alive in the normal way. I parked under lights and sat there shaking until my breathing slowed. In the morning, I called the state police and told them there was a stranded trailer at a pull-off on US 52 and that it was unsafe. I didn't mention the chapel. I didn't mention the singing. I just said it had come unhooked and needed recovery. A trooper called me back at 10:17 a.m. His voice was flat, careful. "Ma'am," he said, "we found your trailer." "Is the load still on it?" My throat tight. There was a pause. "There's no load," he said. "Just marks." Like something heavy sat there a long time, and there's a sign. "What sign?" I whispered. "It's a white board," he said. "Hand-painted, says Whitechapel pull off." I closed my eyes, heart pounding. "Is there a chapel?" Another pause, longer. "No," he said, "there's no chapel." After that, my business took a hit. Word travels fast when you abandon a load. I paid fines. I lost a couple contracts. I told everyone my hitch failed. I told myself 100 times I'd done the only thing I could. But the lasting impact isn't paperwork. It's what happens when I drive at night and see a hand-painted sign on a shoulder where there shouldn't be one. It's the way hymns make my skin tight now, even in daylight. It's the way my garment sometimes wakes up on its own and displays one phrase in the dark cab when I haven't touched it. Delivery confirmed, and on those nights, if I turn the radio off and listen hard, I can still hear faint singing under the engine noise, patient, synchronized, like something on a backroad pull-off is waiting for the next driver to follow the route it wrote for them. Story 5. The Mirror Mileposts on I-81. My name is Thaddeus Klein, and by January 2020, I'd been a night shift maintenance contractor for the Virginia Department of Transportation for almost 9 years. I wasn't a trooper or a firefighter, but I've worked enough wrecks and closures that the interstate at midnight feels like its own species of wilderness. My job that winter was mostly sign work: replace damaged reflectors, repair guardrail hardware, inspect milepost markers after storms, and document anything that could become a liability. I drove a white Service F250 with amber strobes, a ladder rack, and a lockbox full of bolts and tamper-proof screws. I carried a Garmin handheld because the state-issued tablet lost signal in the valleys. I also carried a small magnetic compass clipped to my dash, mostly out of habit for my dad, who believed you shouldn't trust electronics alone in the mountains. On January 18, 2020, I clocked in at the VDOT yard in Wytheville at 10:06 p.m. and got assigned a short list. Check mileposts and delineators southbound on I-81 between exit 70 and exit 62. Then respond if dispatch called anything urgent. A windstorm earlier in the day had knocked down branches and pushed debris into the shoulder. Normal winter stuff. The air was dry and bitter, the kind that makes your nose sting when you breathe in too fast. The sky was clear, but the moonlight made the trees look like jagged cutouts. I headed out with coffee and a thermos reflective vest on the passenger seat, and my tools sorted in the bed. Traffic was light, mostly long-haul trucks running the corridor and occasional cars slicing through like they were afraid to slow down in the dark. The amber strobes on my roof cast orange flashes over the guardrails and snow patches. The radio in my truck was tuned to VDOT dispatch, not a CB, but I kept a handheld CB in the center console anyway, because truckers are an early warning system if you know how to listen. At 10:41, I pulled onto the shoulder near milepost 68 to check a marker that had been reported loose. The milepost stood straight, reflective green with white numbers. Nothing wrong. I photographed it, noted it on my log, and got back in the truck. Simple. I continued south, watching for downed branches, scanning the shoulder. The first strange thing happened at milepost 66. It wasn't the number that bothered me. It was the way it reflected. Most mileposts catch your headlights and throw back a clean rectangle of light. This one threw back a pale, bluish reflection, like the reflective sheeting was a different material. When my headlights hit it, the reflection didn't just brighten, it seemed to deepen, like looking into water. I slowed, thinking maybe it was a non-standard replacement sign or an old marker from another district. I pulled onto the shoulder and approached with my flashlight. The sign read, Mile 66, nothing unusual. But beneath the number, in smaller letters I'd never seen on a milepost, it read, Return lane. The letters were faint, as if printed under the reflective layer. I leaned closer, breathing fog into the cold air. The word return was slightly warped, like it had been stretched. I stepped back and looked up and down the interstate. Normal, trucks in the right lane. A car far back, headlights low. The wind whispered through bare branches. Then my compass on the dash did a slow, deliberate half-turn and pointed east. On I-81 here, east made no sense. I-81 runs north-south through that stretch. My compass needle should have pointed roughly toward the passenger side, consistent. Instead, it swung, paused, and trembled as if arguing with itself. I tapped the compass once. The needle snapped back to north, then drifted again. I told myself it was interference from the truck's electronics. The magnet in the dash mount, something. I logged the milepost anomaly anyway, non-standard lettering under sheeting, because that's what my brain does when it wants to turn fear into paperwork. I got back on the road. At 11:07, the state-issued tablet chimed with a dispatch message. Check report of debris near MP64 SB. I was already approaching 64, so I acknowledged. Nothing out of the ordinary. I saw a small branch on the shoulder, nothing hazardous. I noted cleared and kept going. At milepost 63, I passed a wrecked deer on the shoulder, fresh enough that the eyes still looked wet. I've seen hundreds. I didn't stop. At milepost 62, I expected to see exit 62 signage for rural retreat. Instead, I saw a green overhead sign that read, Exit 62 return lane, and beneath it in smaller text, a destination I didn't recognize, Kestrel Fork. I hit my brakes gently, more out of confusion than panic. The sign looked new, clean, reflective surface, modern font. But the destination name sat wrong in my mind, Kestrel Fork. I'd never heard it, and I know most of the local place names, even the tiny ones, because we deal with access points, county roads, detours. There was no Kestrel Fork in that corridor. My tablet map showed exit 62 as usual, rural retreat, no Kestrel Fork. The map still displayed my position correctly. The time read 11:11. I glanced at my compass. The needle shook again. I kept going because the interstate doesn't allow you to stop and puzzle out your reality for long. That's how you get hit. The next milepost marker appeared, 61, but it wasn't on the right shoulder. It stood on the median side, facing the southbound lanes, angled slightly as if it wanted drivers to look at it longer. Its reflective surface flashed blue-white when my headlights hit it. It read, Mile 61, and beneath it, faint and illegible at speed, a second line of text. I couldn't make it out. A truck passed me on the left, a reefer unit, its trailer humming. As it passed the milepost, the truck's taillights flickered, and for a split second I saw a second set of taillights overlapping the first, like a reflection. Then the truck continued, oblivious. My own headlights felt dimmer for a moment. The road surface ahead looked different, less textured, smoother, almost glossy, as if the asphalt was new. The lane lines glowed too bright. I blinked hard and everything returned to normal. I told myself fatigue was playing games. I'd been up since 6 a.m., my shift was overnight. Eyes do weird things on monotonous roadways. Then my VDOT radio crackled and dispatch said my name. Unit 312, confirm your location. I keyed up. 312, southbound around mile 61. A pause, then dispatch replied, voice cautious. Negative. Last AVL ping shows you northbound at mile 68. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I left 68 20 minutes ago. Unit 312 advised, dispatch said. Your beacon is not showing on camera feed south of exit 70. I glanced at my strobes in the windshield reflection. They were flashing. I could see the orange pulse on the dash. If cameras weren't seeing me, that meant either the cameras were down or I wasn't where the cameras were. I said the first thing that came to mind. Tablets showing me southbound. I'm on I-81. Dispatch didn't answer immediately. Then, Unit 312, pull off at the next safe location. If you're disoriented, we can send troopers. Disoriented. The word felt like a slap. I scanned ahead for a pull-off. There was a rest area sign in the distance. Rest area 1 mile. That wasn't right either. There is a rest area farther north, not here, but maybe I was remembering wrong. Maybe construction had changed things. I kept going. The rest area came up fast. A wide ramp peeled off to the right, cleanly striped. I signaled, took it, and rolled into a parking lot lit by tall sodium lamps. The lot was empty, not one car, not one truck. On I-81 at night, rest areas always have something. A sleeper cab idling, a minivan, a lone sedan. But this lot was bare, as if it had been built and never opened. I parked under a lamp and set my brake. The sodium light above me didn't buzz, it didn't flicker. It shone steady and flat, making shadows look painted on. The rest area building sat ahead, low concrete, dark windows. A vending machine glowed near the entrance, but its glow was too white, too intense, like a floodlight behind glass. I could see the outline of soda bottles inside, perfectly aligned. I checked my phone. No signal. I checked my tablet. It still showed I-81. Mile 60. It still showed my route line. But the time had frozen at 11:11, matching earlier as if the clock had stopped. My compass needle spun slowly in place. I took a breath and forced myself to do my job, verify physical reality. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and the cold hit me like an open freezer. My breath billowed thick. The air smelled wrong, not exhaust and damp leaves, but something like cold stone and old metal. My boots crunched on gravel that sounded too uniform, like broken glass poured evenly. I walked toward the building. The vending machine's glow made the concrete around it look bleached. As I approached, I heard a faint noise inside the building. Not footsteps, not voices, a low, rhythmic clack like a turned signal. I stopped, listening. The clack continued steady. I realized it matched my own truck's hazard light relay, faintly audible through the night, but my hazards weren't on. Only my roof strobes and headlights. I turned back and looked at my truck. My truck's taillights were blinking, hazards engaged, even though my switch was off. The blink pattern wasn't normal. It was too slow, too deliberate. And with each blink, the shadows in the lot shifted in a way that felt wrong. Not like light moving, but like the darkness was rearranging itself. I walked back to the truck quickly, heart pounding. I opened the driver's door and the interior light didn't come on. The cab was darker than it should have been under a parking lot lamp. I reached for the hazard switch and flipped it off. The taillights kept blinking. Then the tablet screen flashed and displayed a message that wasn't a VDOT app notification. It was plain text, centered. Return lane active under it, a countdown. 60, 59, 58. My stomach clenched. I didn't know what it was counting down to, but my body recognized the shape of a deadline. My VDOT radio hissed with static, then a new voice came through, male, close, too clear for a state radio. "You shouldn't have parked," the voice said. I froze, hand hovering over the mic. "Who is this?" The voice laughed softly. "You like signs, Thaddeus. You like numbers. You like being told where you are." My name again, my pulse hammered in my throat. "I'm calling troopers," I said, trying to sound steady. "No signal," the voice replied calmly. "No cameras, no troopers, not in the return lane." The countdown on the tablet ticked. 41, 40, 39. I slammed the truck into gear out of instinct, as if motion itself could break whatever pattern I'd entered. The engine started normally. The strobes flashed. The tablet stayed on that message. I rolled forward out of the parking spot toward the rest area exit. The exit ramp didn't lead back to the interstate. It led into trees. A two-lane road appeared, one, narrow and unstriped, cutting into the woods like a tunnel. The sodium lights ended abruptly at the edge, and beyond that was darkness so thick it looked solid. I stopped at the edge. The truck idled, engine rumbling. My headlights shone into the tree line and revealed a road surface that looked like old asphalt patched with tar. No reflectors, no signs, just that road. The tablet countdown hit 12, 11, 10. The voice on the radio returned, gentle now. "You're going to go back," it said. "You always go back." The countdown hit 3, 2, 1. The tablet went black. My headlights dimmed. The road ahead seemed to tilt downward, not physically, but in my perception, like the geometry of it changed. The trees leaned inward, forming an arch that reminded me of a tunnel mouth. Then behind my truck in the rest area lot, a milepost marker stood where there had been empty pavement. Mile 60. It faced me, reflective, blue-white. Beneath it, the faint second line was readable now in my headlights. Mirror, a cold understanding crawled up my spine. Mirror, return lane. The mileposts weren't just markers. They were instructions. They were boundaries. I did the only thing that felt sane. I reversed. I backed my truck away from the tree road, back into the rest area lot, keeping my headlights on that milepost as if it could move. The reflective blue-white shimmered like water. For a moment in that shimmer, I thought I saw shapes. Headlights, taillights, the faint outline of a roadway behind the sign that wasn't the lot I stood in. My radio crackled with another voice, female this time, breathy, urgent. "Don't cross the mirror," she said. I grabbed the mic. "Who are you?" "Somebody who got counted," she replied. "Don't let it count you." The phrase hit me hard. The countdown, counting, not time measuring. The milepost's blue-white reflection pulsed slightly as if responding to the voice. In my rearview mirror, the rest area building's windows showed a faint glow now, as if lights had turned on inside. But the glow didn't look like interior lighting. It looked like headlights shining from within, trapped, angled toward the glass. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to decide whether to drive forward, backward, anything. The interstate was nowhere. Only the lot, the building, the tree road, and the milepost that said mirror. The woman's voice on the radio whispered, "Look at your rear plate." I swallowed and leaned toward my side mirror, angling it down. The rear of my truck under the sodium lamp looked normal, but my license plate, normally white with blue, looked reversed. The numbers were backward, like I was seeing them through glass. My breath caught. I turned my head and looked directly through the rear window. The numbers were correct, but in the mirror, reversed. And then I realized something worse. In my rearview mirror, my face looked slightly delayed, like the reflection was half a second behind my movement. When I blinked, the reflection blinked a beat later. When I turned my head, the reflection followed with a subtle lag. The mirror wasn't reflecting me, it was replaying me. The radio male voice returned, pleased. You see it now. The building's front door opened slowly, squealing softly, and a figure stepped out. It wore a reflective vest like mine, orange stripes catching the sodium light. It held a clipboard. It walked toward my truck with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew the lot belonged to him. I stared, heart pounding because I recognized the way it moved. It moved like me. The figure reached the edge of my headlights and stopped. The vest was identical, right down to a tear in the left shoulder seam I'd made last year snagging on a guardrail bolt. The clipboard was the same brand I used. The figure lifted its head. Its face was not my face. It was smooth, pale, and featureless like a mannequin dipped in wax. But where eyes should have been, there were two dark reflective ovals that caught my headlights and threw back that same bluish shimmer as the mileposts. It lifted the clipboard and with a pen began to write. The sound of the pen scratching paper carried across the lot too clearly, as if amplified. My tablet, black on the dash, suddenly lit again, showing a form I'd never seen. At the top it read, Incident Report Subject, THADDUSKLINE status. In transit below, lines filled in on their own as if someone were typing. Entered return lane at MP66, proceeded to mirror milepost, subject observed, subject compliant. I felt nausea rise. No, I whispered. The faceless figure pointed its pen toward the milepost that read mirror. Then it pointed toward my truck. Then it pointed toward the tree road. It was directing me, routing me. Like a detour officer waving traffic, the woman's voice on the radio hissed, "Don't follow its hands." "What do?" I whispered. "Break the reflection," she said. "Make it lose you." I glanced at my rearview mirror at the delayed version of myself. My mind latched onto the simplest possibility. If the mirror was the trap, break it. But breaking state property in my rational world is unthinkable. In this world, it felt like a small price to keep my name. I grabbed my tire thumper from behind the seat, a short, heavy stick I used to tap tires and check inflation by sound. I swung it up and, without giving myself time to hesitate, smashed my mirror. Glass spiderweb then shattered, raining fragments onto the dash. The reflection vanished, replaced by jagged shards catching sodium light. The lot lurched, not physically. The sense of it shifted like a camera jerking. The faceless figure froze mid-motion, pen hovering. The milepost's blue shimmer flickered. The building's window glow dimmed. My tablet screen glitched, the incident report text stuttering, then blanking. The radio male voice snarled, suddenly angry. "You don't get to damage the lane." I didn't answer. I threw the truck into gear and drove, not toward the tree road, not toward the milepost, but straight across the rest area lot toward the opposite corner where a maintenance gate should have been. I aimed for anything that looked like an exit that wasn't part of their route. The headlights swept across the empty lot, and for a moment I saw rows of parked vehicles that weren't there before. Shadowy outlines, dozens of them aligned neatly. Trucks, service vehicles, cars, all dark, all empty. Then the headlights passed and the lot was empty again. I reached the far corner and found a chain-link gate I didn't remember, closed and padlocked. A sign on it read, "Authorized exit only." I hit the brakes. The engine idled. My heartbeat thundered. Behind me, the faceless figure began to move again, faster now, walking toward my truck with purposeful steps. The clipboard hung at its side. The pen was raised like a baton. The milepost shimmered brighter, casting blue-white light that seemed to spill across the pavement like a puddle. The tree road's darkness deepened as if waiting. I slammed my truck into reverse, backed hard, then whipped the wheel and accelerated straight at the gate. Metal screeched. Chain link bowed. The padlock snapped. The gate burst open with a noise that felt like tearing cloth. The instant I crossed through, cold air hit me and my headlights suddenly illuminated a normal roadway shoulder with normal reflectors. The interstate roar returned, distant trucks, wind, the low hum of real traffic. My phone buzzed with service returning, a flood of notifications. My tablet clock jumped from 11 to 12:04. I slowed, shaking, and pulled onto the shoulder under a real overhead sign that read Exit 62/Rural Retreat. Normal, familiar, relief so sharp it hurt. But when I looked in my side mirror, the rest area ramp behind me was gone. There was no entrance, no lot, no building, just tree line and guardrail and dark. My VDOT radio crackled with dispatch again, sounding normal now. Unit 312, confirmed status. We lost you for 53 minutes. Swallowed hard. I'm southbound at exit 62. Had a tablet glitch. Dispatch side. Copy, return to yard when able, we'll reassign. I drove back to Wytheville without stopping. I kept my eyes on every milepost, every sign, every reflective marker. None of them shimmered blue. None of them said return lane. The next morning in daylight, I inspected my truck. The rearview mirror was shattered as expected. Glass in the dash vents, the cup holders everywhere. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. On the inside of the windshield, at the exact height of my eyes when I drive, a faint blue-white smear was visible, like residue from a sticker that had been peeled off. When I wiped it with a cloth, the smear didn't disappear. It spread like oil on glass. And in that spread, under certain angles of light, I could make out faint letters, reversed like a mirror. Return lane active. I reported a mirror break accident and paid out of pocket to replace it. I told my supervisor I'd hit a pothole and the mirror snapped. He didn't ask questions. Nobody wanted questions. But I stopped trusting reflective signs at night. I started glancing at mileposts the way you glance at strangers in an empty parking lot. And sometimes when I'm driving I-81 and a milepost catches my headlights just right, I see that blue-white shimmer again, and my rearview mirror seems to lag by half a beat. On those nights, I keep my eyes forward and my hands steady because I know there are lanes in Appalachia that aren't on any map, lanes built out of repetition, paperwork, and reflection, and they don't need you to crash to take you. They just need you to pull off. Story 6. The dispatcher who wasn't there. My name is Garrett Poole, and by August 2022, I've been running independent loads through Tennessee and Kentucky for 6 years, flatbed mostly, occasionally dry van work when the rate was right. I'm not the kind of driver who needs hand-holding. I know how to read load boards, negotiate brokers, manage my own hours, and stay out of the dot's crosshairs. I keep a tight ship, logbook clean, truck maintained, receipts organized in a binder because the IRS doesn't care about your sob story. I work with a handful of small dispatchers who know me well enough not to waste my time with garbage freight. One of those dispatchers was a woman named Corrine Vale. I'd never met her in person, but we'd done business for 3 years. She worked out of a small outfit in Knoxville called Ridgeline Logistics. She'd call or text when something came up that fit my lanes, always reasonable, never pushy. She spoke with a soft Appalachian drawl, the kind that makes everything sound patient, even when she was chasing a late pickup. I trusted her because she'd pulled me out of tight spots before, found backhauls when I was stuck empty in dead zones, rerouted me around closures before they hit the news. On August 11th, 2022, I finished unloading lumber at a yard outside Kingsport and pulled into a Love's to fuel and plan my next move. It was 6:47 p.m., hot and humid, the kind of evening where the asphalt shimmers and your shirt sticks to your back after 5 seconds outside. I sat in the cab with the AC running, scrolling load boards on my phone when Corrine's number lit up the screen. I answered. "Hey, Kareen." Her voice came through clear, warm. "Garrett, you empty?" "Yeah, just cleared Kingsport, looking for anything south or west." "I got something," she said. "Short run, but it pays decent. Pick her load out of a reclaim yard near Rogersville. Going to a smaller receiver outside Wartburg. About 100 miles total, pays $1,200 flat." I did the math. Not great per mile, but Wartburg was close to I-40 and I could grab something westbound from there. "What's the cargo?" "Reclaimed timber," she said. "Old barn wood, deconstructed beams, already banded and staged, should be an easy tarp." I nodded to myself. "Pick up time. They're open till 9 tonight. You can grab it now if you want. I'll text you the address and contact name." "Sounds good, send it over." She paused and I heard faint static on the line like interference. Then her voice returned, softer. "Garrett, one thing, the contact's name is Lyle. He's particular. Don't let him rush your securement. Take your time." I frowned slightly. "Particular how?" "Just trust me, he'll want you moving fast. Don't." It was an odd thing to say, but Kareen had never steered me wrong. "All right. I'll watch it." "Good," she said, and the line went quiet for a beat. Then, "Drive safe." She hung up before I could respond. A moment later, a text arrived with the address, contact name Lyle Brennan, and a phone number. The address was a rural route outside Rogersville, no business name, just coordinates and a description. Gravel lot, metal barn, green tin roof. I plugged the coordinates into my Garmin and rolled out. The drive took about 40 minutes, winding through back roads that narrowed as they climbed into wooded ridges. The sun was sinking, painting the sky orange and purple. My phone signal faded in and out. The Garmin held steady, leading me down a county road that turned to gravel, then to a rutted lane that opened into a wide lot surrounded by trees. The barn sat at the far end, its green tin roof catching the last of the daylight. Stacks of weathered timber sat on pallets near a loading dock made of cinder blocks and planks. A man stood beside a small front-end loader, arms crossed, watching my truck approach. I assumed that was Lyle. I parked, set my brake, and climbed out. The air smelled like sawdust and motor oil. The man walked toward me, 50s lean, wearing a faded ball cap and work boots caked with red clay. His face was lined and hard, the kind you get from decades outdoors. "You Garrett," he called. "Yeah, you Lyle." He nodded once. "Let's get you loaded. I want you out before dark." I glanced at the sky. Plenty of light left, maybe an hour. "No problem, I just need to do my securement right." Lyle's eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't take all night." I kept my tone easy. "Won't, just doing it safe." He grunted and motioned toward the stacks. 6 bundles, already banded, loaders running, let's go. The next 20 minutes were efficient. Lyle operated the loader with the kind of precision that comes from experience, setting each bundle of timber onto my flatbed gently, evenly distributed. The wood was old, gray and cracked, heavy with age. Some pieces still had mortise joints and nail holes. Barn wood, like Kareen said, reclaimed and repurposed. I strapped and chained each bundle carefully, checking angles, making sure nothing would shift. Lyle stood nearby, hands on his hips, watching. Every few minutes he'd mutter, "That's good enough," or "You're burning daylight." I ignored him. Kareen's warning echoed, "Don't let him rush you." When I finished, I walked the length of the load twice, tugging straps, checking binders. Everything was tight. Lyle handed me a clipboard with a BOL. The paperwork was hand-written, ink smudged in places. The receiver name was listed as W. Trent, Wartburg Reclaim. I signed, handed it back. "We're good." Lyle didn't smile. "You know the route?" "Yeah." "Garmin's got it." He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the tree line. "Stay on the main roads," he said quietly. "Don't take shortcuts if your GPS offers one." The hairs on my neck prickled. "Why?" He looked at me for a long second, then turned and walked back toward the barn without answering. I climbed into my cab, uneasy but not alarmed. I'd met plenty of odd folks in this business. Lyle was just one more. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and began the drive toward Wartburg. The Garmin showed a straightforward route, back to the county road, then onto TN-70, then a series of state highways. Estimated time, 1 hour 40 minutes. The sun set quickly once I hit the main road. Within 15 minutes, full in, broken only by my headlights and the occasional farmhouse light in the distance. Traffic was non-existent. My CB was quiet. I turned on the radio classic rock station out of Knoxville, but the signal faded after a few songs replaced by static. At 8:34 p.m. my phone rang. Kareen's number. I answered on the truck's Bluetooth. "Yeah," her voice came through, calm but slightly strained. "Garrett, where are you?" "On 70, headed toward Wartburg, about an hour out." A pause, then, "Did Lyle try to rush you?" "Yeah, I didn't let him." "Good." Her voice softened with what sounded like relief. "Stay on 70. Don't take any shortcuts." I frowned. Lyle said the same thing. "What's going on?" Static crackled on the line. When her voice returned, it sounded farther away. "There's a turn your GPS might suggest. County Road 442, it looks faster, don't take it." "Why not?" The static grew louder and her words broke apart. "Not a real road doesn't go where it says." "Kareen, you're breaking up." The line went dead. I tried calling her back. The call wouldn't connect. No signal. I glanced at my phone, one bar, flickering. The Garmin showed my route clearly, no alternate suggestions yet. I kept driving. At 8:51, the Garmin chimed. The map recalculated and a new route appeared, a dotted line peeling off TN70 onto a smaller road labeled CR 442. The estimated time dropped by 18 minutes. I stared at the screen. The route looked legitimate. A county road cutting through a rural area, rejoining my path farther south. Faster, cleaner. But Kareen's warning stuck in my mind. Don't take it. I ignored the Garmin's suggestion and stayed on TN70. The Garmin chimed again. Recalculating. The dotted line reappeared, more insistent. The time savings increased to 22 minutes. I reached over and muted the Garmin's voice. I'd follow the map visually but ignore its suggestions. A few minutes later, my phone rang again. Kareen's number. I answered quickly. "Kareen." A man's voice replied. Not Lyle. Someone else older with a rasp like gravel in a drain pipe. "You're still on 70, the voice said. It wasn't a question, my chest tight. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows Kareen sent you the long way." My hands gripped the wheel. "Where's Kareen?" A soft laugh, dry and humorless. "She ain't where you think." The line clicked off. My heart pounded. I tried calling Kareen again, straight to voicemail. I tried calling Ridgeline Logistics' office number. No answer. The Garmin chimed a third time. The CR 442 route flashed, brighter now, and the map zoomed in on the turn, trying to convince me. I kept going straight. At 9:07, I passed a green highway sign, WRTBURG 41 miles. The number felt wrong. I should have been closer by now. I checked my odometer. I'd driven the right distance. But the mileage to Wartburg hadn't decreased as much as it should have. The road stretched ahead, empty and dark. My headlights caught reflectors, occasional guardrails, nothing else. The woods pressed close on both sides, dense and black. Then ahead on the right shoulder, I saw a figure standing under a tree. A woman in a light-colored jacket, arm raised like she was flagging someone down. I slowed instinctively. It's what you do. Someone stranded at night in the middle of nowhere, you slow down, assess, decide if you're stopping. As I got closer, my headlights lit her face. It was Kareen. I slammed the brakes. The truck shuddered to a stop on the shoulder, air brakes hissing. I stared through the windshield, heart hammering. Kareen stood 30 feet ahead, illuminated by my headlights. She wore a jacket I'd never seen her in, pale blue, too light for the season. Her face looked tired, but it was her. Same features, same dark hair pulled back. She raised her hand again, motioning for me to stop, even though I already had. I grabbed my phone. Still no signal. I opened the door and stepped out into the humid night, boots crunching gravel. "Kareen!" My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. She didn't respond. She just stood there, arms still raised, face expressionless. I took a step closer. "What are you doing out here?" Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Her lips formed words I couldn't hear. Then her arm dropped and she pointed behind me. I turned. The road behind my truck was gone, not hidden by darkness. Gone. Where asphalt and centerline should have been, there was nothing but trees and underbrush, as if the road had never existed. My trailer sat on gravel that ended abruptly 5 feet behind the rear tires like a dock over water. My breath caught. I spun back toward Kareen. She was closer now, 10 feet away. I hadn't heard her move. Her face was still expressionless, but her eyes didn't blink. They stared, unmoving, as if painted on. "Kareen," I said slowly, "what's happening?" Her mouth moved again, and this time I heard sound, a faint whisper layered like multiple voices speaking in unison. "You didn't take the turn." My skin crawled. "You told me not to." Her head tilted slightly too far like a puppet with a loose string. "I told you to stay safe," the voices whispered. "But you're not safe, you're just slow." I backed toward my truck, hand fumbling for the door handle. "You're not Kareen." The figure's smile was and wrong, lips pulling back too tight. "I'm what she became when the road took her." My hand found the door. I yanked it open and climbed in, slamming it shut. Through the windshield, the figure stood motionless, watching. I threw the truck into gear and stomped the accelerator. Tires bit gravel, and I lurched forward past the figure, past the tree line. In my side mirror, I saw her turn and walk calmly into the woods, vanishing between the trees like smoke. The road ahead reappeared, asphalt solid and real under my tires. The Garmin blinked and recalculated. TN70 stretched forward, familiar and mapped. But at 9:23, my phone rang again. Kareen's number. I didn't want to answer. I stared at the screen, hands shaking. Then I pressed accept and said nothing. A woman's voice came through, Kareen's real voice this time, strained and desperate. "Garrett, if you're hearing this, don't stop for me. Don't stop for anyone who looks like me. I'm not on the road anymore. I haven't been for 2 years." My throat closed. "What?" Her voice cracked. "I took 442. It was faster. It wasn't real. I've been trying to warn drivers ever since, but the road, it uses me. It wears my voice. Please, don't let it take you too." The line went silent. I pulled over onto a wide shoulder near a gas station, real lit with cars at the pumps. I sat there shaking, lights on, engine running, until a state trooper tapped on my window and asked if I was all right. I told him I was tired. He suggested I rest. I did. In the morning, I called Ridgeline Logistics. A man answered, voice unfamiliar. I asked for Kareen Vale. He paused. "We don't have anyone by that name," he said. "She's been dispatching for you for 3 years, I insisted. Another pause. "Sir, I've owned this company for 5 years. I don't know a Kareen Vale." I hung up and searched her name online. I found an obituary from 2020. Kareen Vale, age 34, died in a single-vehicle accident on County Road 442 near Wartburg. No other details. I delivered the load to Wartburg that afternoon. The receiver, W. Trent, was a quiet, older man who signed the BOL without much conversation. As I unstrapped the timber, he looked at the wood carefully, running his hand along a beam. "This is good reclaim," he said. "Where'd it come from?" "Barn outside Rogersville," I replied. He frowned. "That barn burned down in 2019. I stared at him. "I was just there yesterday." He shook his head slowly. "You might have been somewhere, but it wasn't that barn." I left Wartburg that evening and haven't taken a load from Ridgeline since. The number that used to be Kareen's is disconnected now. The address for the Rogersville leads to an empty lot overgrown with weeds. But sometimes, late at night when I'm driving alone on a back road, my phone will ring with no caller ID. If I answer, I hear her voice, Kareen's real voice, not the layered whisper, warning me about a shortcut, a turn, a faster route. And every time I stay on the long road because I know now that some dispatchers aren't trying to save you time. They're trying to save you.